I had been living in the city, grinding away at a project for 3 months straight. My boss finally insisted I take a long weekend before I burned out. I needed to get out of town, away from the noise, the deadlines, and the pressure. So I decided to drive up to the family cabin at Pine Lake. It was a modest two-bedroom log cabin my grandfather had built in 1972. I inherited it 3 years ago when he passed away. And while I didn't get to visit often, it had always been my escape from the world. The cabin was remote, surrounded by tall pines, and had no Wi Fi, exactly what I needed. The drive up was therapeutic, the fall colors painting the mountains in brilliant hues of red and gold. By the time I pulled into the gravel driveway at 3 p.m., I could already taste the beer I'd planned to drink on the deck, overlooking the lake. But something was wrong. The lights were on inside the cabin, both the living room and kitchen windows glowing warmly. I distinctly remembered turning everything off the last time I was here in July. There was music, too, a heavy bass thumping through the walls. I stood there in the driveway, confused. I hadn't left any lights on, and no one else was supposed to be here. I got out of the car, keys in hand, and tried the front door. It was locked from the inside. The deadbolt wouldn't budge. Someone was inside. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "Excuse me. What exactly do you think you're doing?" I turned around to find a woman standing there, her posture rigid and condescending. She was in her late 40s, with perfectly done blonde hair and enough makeup for a dinner party. Her designer athleisure screamed money. She introduced herself as Karen Whitmore, the HOA president. I'd seen her around but never spoken to her before. "I'm trying to get into my cabin," I said, holding up my keys. "I'm Marcus Thompson. I own this place." It hit me then. This wasn't an accident. Karen had been planning this. She'd set me up. She wasn't just some angry HOA president. She was trying to make me disappear. "Mr. Thompson," Officer Mills said, "you're going to need to leave. We have an ongoing dispute about access rights here. You can't be here until that's sorted." I tried to argue, but it was no use. The manila folder full of lies had more weight than my ownership deed. I had no choice but to leave, still clutching my keys as Karen smiled behind me. That night, I stayed in a cheap motel, my mind racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was going on, and I couldn't just walk away. I called a property lawyer the next morning, and they confirmed what I already knew. My ownership was ironclad. Karen's claims about irregularities were fabricated. With legal backup, I decided to dig deeper. I spent hours combing through public records and social media profiles. What I found disturbed me. Karen had been involved in several property disputes in the neighborhood. In each case, the families were forced to sell their cabins after prolonged legal battles, all initiated by Karen. The buyers of these properties were often connected to the HOA. Something was off, and Karen had been orchestrating it all. The real breakthrough came when I stumbled upon information about Karen's son, Jake Whitmore. He had been a fixture in local police reports until 8 months ago, when he suddenly disappeared. Domestic disturbances, bar fights, harassment, it was all there. And then nothing. No social media, no job records, no trace. It was like Jake had ceased to exist. I didn't know how far this went, but I knew I had to find out. I returned to Pine Lake the following week and parked at a scenic overlook, binoculars in hand. I wasn't going to let Karen and Jake get away with this. What I saw through the lens sent chills down my spine. Someone was definitely living in my cabin. And when I caught my first clear glimpse through the upstairs window, my blood froze. It was Jake Whitmore. Jake had been hiding in my cabin, using it as a base for something much worse than a simple property dispute. I called the FBI tip line, and soon after, everything began to unfold. Jake wasn't just hiding. He was wanted for a series of violent crimes across several states, including armed robberies that had turned deadly. I wasn't just dealing with a property squatter. I was dealing with a fugitive. As I continued to monitor the cabin, the situation grew even more terrifying. Jake wasn't alone. Karen was still helping him cover up his crimes. I knew I had to act fast. The FBI launched an operation to catch them both, but I needed to gather more evidence. I installed cameras around the cabin and a parabolic microphone to record their conversations. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. The more I learned, the darker the situation became. Jake had killed at least 8 people, and Karen had been helping him hide the bodies, including at my cabin. She wasn't just an accomplice, she was an active participant in the murders. But things took a chilling turn when I heard Jake on the recording, casually talking about how they used my cabin as a base for their operations. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about property, it was about lives lost. My cabin had become the site of horrific crimes, and Karen was complicit in every single one. With the evidence in hand, I knew I had to do something before they could cover their tracks. I set up a trap, orchestrating a meeting with Karen and Jake, knowing it would be my best chance to get them to confess. The night of the meeting, everything went according to plan. The FBI was in position, the cameras were rolling, and I was wearing a wire. Karen and Jake didn't realize they were already caught. As they confessed to their crimes, I could hear the cold, calculating way they spoke about their actions. When Jake started talking about how my cabin had been perfect for hiding evidence, I knew I had them. The final twist came when Karen lunged at me with a knife, but the FBI was ready. They arrested Jake, who bolted for the back door, but it was too late. He was caught, and Karen was subdued before she could do any more damage. The aftermath was swift. Jake was sentenced to life in prison for his role in the murders, and Karen was charged with conspiracy, obstruction, and accessory to multiple homicides. The evidence I'd gathered, along with their confessions, ensured that they would never hurt anyone again. As for me, I kept the cabin. But it was no longer just a place of solitude. It had become a symbol of justice, a reminder that even in the darkest of circumstances, the truth always comes to light. The neighborhood that had once shunned me now rallied around me, offering their support. The cabin was no longer a place of horror. It was a place of healing. And for the first time in months, I could finally breathe easy.